cannot wait for another great roundtable discussion. Not just one, but two. I am just shocked at the feedback I'm getting from these discussions and how many people are talking about them afterwards throughout the country, listening to the different roundtable discussions. And today, again, controversy will definitely hit with these two topics. Our first one is going to be a homeschool roundtable discussion, and I decided to take two people that homeschool and probably homeschool in different ways. So it'll be very interesting. But I do have in the studio Dr. Ernie Detour. Thanks for coming to the studio to be part of the roundtable discussions.
Yes, no, thanks for having me again. I'm excited about the topic.
Absolutely. And first I have on the line Rebecca Grotto. Rebecca, thanks for calling.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
To talk about the whole homeschool thing, but I'm going to introduce my other member of the roundtable discussion, Margaret Bream. Margaret, thanks for calling.
Well, thanks for having me, Neil. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Rebecca, tell me how your environment in homeschooling, because we all know a lot of people think homeschooling is just not the way to go. And I kind of a side note, in one of my discussions with somebody on my network, we talked about Brad and Angelina are homeschooling. So it's really starting to become a more of a mainstream thing and not so odd in ways. Wouldn't you agree, Rebecca?
Oh, it's a growing trend. I think it's growing 7 to 15% per year. And, it's not something that I intentionally wanted to do. I was going along with, like everybody else, mainstream schooling, and then my son, out of nowhere, brought it up in 4th grade. And I immediately, like a great parent, dismissed him. I said, absolutely not. You're not going to be homeschooled. There is no way I'm going to lose my freedom. And I didn't know. I was just unaware, as most parents are. What does that mean? You'll have an inferior education. I want you to get into college. I don't know that you will if you're homeschooled. But I have to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised when I did begin to homeschool him. I caved into his wishes. And I started to homeschool him, and what I found was incredible statistics on homeschoolers. I'm happy to say that both he and my younger daughter are at UC Berkeley right now, straight A's, doing great. So the whole myth about kids who are homeschooled don't get into college or have a harder time, not true. Colleges actually these days are recruiting homeschoolers because what they're finding, colleges like Yale, Harvard, UC Berkeley, Notre Dame, they're actively recruiting the kids because what they find is they're self-motivated, they're self-disciplined, they're self-reliant, they actually make better students. So there's some great facts out there that I wish I had known because I would have been less reticent to get him started in homeschooling.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very big surprise, and it's something that I also consider, because my wife's a teacher, that at one point in time that would be a better option in a way because of how you can tailor things. But I want to go to Margaret now, who's, I guess, a newer homeschool parent. It was a little different than you thought when you first heard it from all the different people we've been on shows with in the last couple of years?
It's a little different. I actually homeschooled my adult children, 2 of them, for a period of time many, many years ago. And so I had some idea of what it would be. What I'm doing is an online virtual academy with my kids now. And so it's better than it was when I was trying to do it, just buying state-level textbooks, state-approved textbooks, and trying to put together my own curriculum. But I still find it complicated. But, again, I also have 2 of the students I'm homeschooling are special needs. So it's a little bit more difficult in that I'm the one that's having to adapt the learning environment to meet their needs as opposed to having a school staff do that. But on the other hand, my school district wasn't meeting the needs of my children, so I had to do something in order to make sure their educational needs were met and that they were actually learning, because in the environment they were in, they were not actually learning.
And that's the too bad thing, is how to educate special needs kids. And homeschooling is an option where you can finally tailor things using the cyber school, but ultimately you have a lot more autonomy to instruct the way you want to instruct. So I want to take the point to Dr. Ernie Detour, again, an educator for so many years. Why do you think you're seeing such a big rise in the homeschool trend?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do, and I'm talking to 2 experts here, so chime in. The idea that you have control not only of what your children are learning academically, but what they're also learning from other children, good or bad. And sometimes the addressing of issues that are very relevant as kids get older versus do schools actually address them in either an appropriate manner or B, at all? And
I'd like to speak to that point. I've been a therapist for over 25 years, and that was a huge concern of mine. I was working with too many junior high school kids who were actually suicidal because of the bullying that was going on in school and the inability of the school system to address that. So I was very aware of that. And what I know is that children, their kids, when they're in high school, when they're in junior high, they don't have the emotional capacity to deal with some of the issues that we're asking them to deal with, like sexual misconduct, drug use, peer pressure, bullying. Now we've got cyberbullying on top of that. I'm not saying that all kids are going to, fall into this, but enough of them will. And I just think this scars them for the rest of their lives. So I was very aware of that, and I think that if any of this is going on with your kids, I think it's your duty to really jump in there and realize there's a viable alternative. Now, I didn't have to face that. My kids were real young when I pulled them out of school. But I'll tell you what, I would have had them out in a heartbeat if I felt like there was something that they were having to face day after day, 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'll tell you, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't be able to deal with that at my age. Why would I think a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old would have the emotional wherewithal to deal with some of the things that they have to face? And I think it does socialize them negatively. And it's our job to really look at that, and is homeschooling a really good alternative where, as the other person said, we have control. We have greater control, and we can provide protection for our kids. We can provide a safer environment for them to, thrive in.
That's so true, Rebecca. And that's our next roundtable discussion today is bullying. I think that's one of the biggest things. I was talking to a family yesterday that were considering homeschooling just because of the school district not handling the bullying, not getting rid of the bully, still looking, even though the laws have been passed and that it should be zero tolerance. Districts are not doing that. They're still pigeon-toeing. They're still considering maybe doing it. I think that bullying needs to be the same type of an issue if a special needs kid. If you're being bullied, that needs to be a concern as much as if a special needs kid is struggling in school, because two things that could really mess up their whole lives based on that if we don't educate them correctly. And the other thing is, socially and emotionally, do we educate those kids? And if bullying takes place, we aren't doing that. And Margaret, wouldn't you agree to that? I mean, that's another problem that a lot of families are considering homeschooling because of the bullying factor.
Right. And not just bullying from student to student, but one of my children, after we started homeschooling, one day he started crying when we talked about them going back to public school eventually. And he felt bullied by the staff at school because he felt that because of his special needs, that they constantly embarrassed him in front of the classroom, and that they constantly embarrassed him in other ways when they pointed out that he didn't complete something because he didn't know the instructions. And the staff was supposed to provide him extra support in learning the instructions or being able to read the instructions, and they would place him in front of a computer and walk away. And because they had bullied him so much or embarrassed him so much in front of his peers, he was afraid to ask the questions to get the help that they were required to give him in the first place. So it's not just a matter of students picking on each other, but it's a matter of staff picking on the students sometimes, maybe due to their own frustration as to what's going on in the classroom and on the playgrounds. But I think that's a huge concern, that kids are emotionally damaged at school during these years where they're most trying to develop their self-esteem and most trying to determine who they are in the world. And so from so many avenues, they feel picked on and embarrassed and bullied, and, they're hurt. They're emotionally hurt.
When you think of how, again, if teachers aren't being supervised or staff's not being supervised in certain aspects, you run into a lot of problems, because that's one thing that you decide for homeschooling, because the lack of administration to be able to watch every one of the adults that are in the building. We're not just talking teachers, we're talking maybe aides that could be a problem, that could be detrimental, or also parents who come in to help out on the playground, or different aspects that could lead to it. So, Dr. Ernie, what do you think now? Do you think it's a viable option now after you, because I've talked to a lot of educators that are teachers that say, I still don't think homeschooling's that viable of an option. But from hearing the firsthand points, and when we get back, we're going to talk more about how they do it. We talked about what they do and why they did it, but how. What's your thought?
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I know all the strong points of, or the advantages of, homeschooling, and just as a parent, I wonder, are you always on your A game, so to speak? There's a lot of other pressures that parents have. How do you deal with the scheduling or flexibility of scheduling, and being with the child for 24/7, so to speak? Does that take any kind of a toll? It's just a question.
And we can kind of have Margaret and Rebecca answer that question after we take a break. But I wanted to add that point. The thing at homeschooling, the amount of time that's wasted in school is amazing. That you could educate somebody in 2 to 3 hours, and this is from my interviewing many homeschooling families, that takes an 8-hour day, a 6.5 hour day, where they're only teaching to a certain denominator. They're not looking at the individualized levels, and you can kind of individualize and tailor programs through homeschooling. And I think that's where the big situation is, that you don't have to say, okay, 7:30 in the morning, it's time for reading. 8:30, it's time for math. No, math could be at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Hey, we might just go on a field trip today. That's the autonomy of a homeschooling parent. You're listening to Total Education Hour on WRCT 88.3 FM in Pittsburgh. And when we get back, we're going to really tackle how Margaret and Rebecca homeschool their kids, because it's so important for families out there to hear that this is another option. And we'll be back in just a moment.
Here comes the monster. The Tickle Monster.
Just imagine what a little time can do for your family. From the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And now, another adventure with Savings Man.
Oh dear, I can't afford that.
Charge it. You can pay it off later.
Not so fast, credit card guy.
Savings Man.
Don't let him entice you, ma'am. Credit card guy can lead you to big trouble. You need a savings plan.
You're right, savings man.
Get this ballpark estimate worksheet at choosetosave.org. It will help you get started.
Gee, thanks, savings man.
No, thank you.
So visit choosetosave.org and get your ballpark estimate today.
So you've got a song about where to call for government information?
Check this out. We got the benefits and services that'll make you smile to get the answers you need. Put us on speed dial.
That is gold, Your Honor.
1-800-FIT-INFO. Oh!
We're back to the Total Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT in Pittsburgh, streaming live at WRCT.org. I'm with, in this roundtable discussion in the studio, Dr. Ernie Detour, who I guess is, again, a different perspective in the homeschool roundtable discussion compared to two homeschooling moms, Rebecca Grotto and Margaret Bream. Two particularly different people from different parts of the country, homeschooling their kids in different ways. Now, I wanted to address the question that Ernie talked about organization-wise. Rebecca, how do you stay organized throughout that day? I think I gave some good points of my own from interviewing many homeschooling moms that really it doesn't have to be a school environment the way you homeschool, right?
Right. I never sat at my kitchen table teaching my children. Let's just be clear. You don't have to be smarter than a fifth grader. You don't have to be an educator. I mean, really, because this is a growing trend, what you might be pleasantly surprised to find is that your school district, like mine, had an independent study program. So they provided all of the curriculum that the public school system was using. My kids were using the same books and the same tests, the same everything. They were right along with the public school system. The key is that I had all the answer keys too, so I didn't have to do any work. I wasn't actually sitting down and educating my kids. This is the brilliance. They were doing it independently, and I think you brought up a really great point. And again, I was so surprised to find this. My son, the first year, was working 2 hours a day. I was convinced that he was falling behind. I kept going, there's something wrong. He's not doing enough. He was finished with his year's curriculum in the beginning of April. And I couldn't believe it. And I was told over and over again, it's a hurry up and wait in the public school system. It's just a bunch of wasted busy work, wasted time. He was focused. He got up when he wanted. He studied the courses that he wanted when he wanted to. He knew what he needed to do, which was developing independence, self-motivation. There was nobody, standing over him. If he wanted to waste his day Facebooking, he found very quickly that he got no credits for that. These are all life skills that I really was very impressed were, sort of woven into him at a very early age. So, no, I think there's this misconception that we will have to spend our days standing over our kids. That's not true at all. I'm an author. I wrote 2 books in the time that my kids were, homeschooling, one which was just released, and it's all about empowering kids, because I think there's 2 factors that we need to look at when we're educating our kids. One, for sure, is academics. We want our kids to have information, but I think what's more important is that they have a sense of inner confidence, inner certainty. I think their success in life is really due to, do they believe in themselves? So, unfortunately, in the public school system, too often that is chipped away.
Yes.
As Margaret was saying earlier, it could be from the staff, it could be from other kids, but if they lose that, if that's diminished in any way, really, it doesn't matter how much information they have. I don't know if they'll be as successful in life as they could be. So through homeschooling, I think my 2 children, I watched them develop such inner confidence,
yes,
inner pride in their success. And that has taken them so far in life. To date, they're 23, 19, doing brilliantly.
And that's fantastic to hear. And I think that, again, I'm going to bring up a point before I go over to Margaret, because I think Margaret is still a little bit on the side of Dr. Ernie, that, again, she still sees the school system. Again, that's why I brought Margaret on, because Margaret is not, I would say, the gung-ho homeschool advocate. She believes it's a good choice, but not as high as you think, Rebecca. But the fact is that we're running into this situation where kids are going through all these hard times, and then also the model of other children that are in the class that maybe never in their lives they'll ever get to interact with, but only in public school, that could be really bad influences on the children, to the point where they could get in a lot of trouble through peer pressure, where they would never be exposed to that if they were homeschooled. A lot of people say, well, you have to expose them to those things. That's not really the case, because, again, your life, you'll go to where your friends are, but your friends are handed to you sometimes in the school you choose. So the question I want to ask you, Margaret, is, are you a huge homeschool advocate, or do you think it's a really great option, or are you still not sold? And I want to know your point.
Well, it's not that I'm not sold. I don't think I'm the best homeschool mom in the world. And I have 7 children in my home, so I do like the freedom of sending them to public school and having the time away from them. On the other hand, I have to say that what significantly stood out to me this year when I pulled my kids out of school and started homeschooling them was how dumbed down the curriculum was in the classroom. I'm using state-approved curriculum provided through a virtual academy. And in order to give them credit for what they had already experienced in the classroom this year, what the virtual academy told me was to go through the curriculum and the stuff that they had already done, mark it off as completed, and that they'd give them credit for that. I could not match anything up in the curriculum. I used the report cards the kids had. I used the homework papers they had brought home. I couldn't match anything up in the curriculum because the curriculum at the public schools that my children were attending was so dumbed down. And what I'm using now through the virtual academy is the Core Knowledge Foundation curriculum, what your child should know. It's about the books, from the books, what your child should know in this grade or what your child should know in that grade. And in our school system, they were not teaching science and history to any degree in the lower primary grades. And the amount of science and history my children are getting now is phenomenal. They're getting probably the best education money could buy without me spending a dime. So that's where I see that it's a huge plus. My kids are, first of all, their needs are getting met, and they're actually getting an appropriate education, and in the public school they weren't getting that.
And I want to direct that point, and I think that some moms it's just not for them. They want that time away, and public school or private school provides that to send their kids. But if you have the right temperament to be a homeschooling parent, mom or dad, it's a great option because you can really tailor a program, and then you'll find out, guess what? You're still sitting with them for 2.5 hours a day for homework anyways. Why don't you sit with them for 2 hours a day and educate them, and then it's all over. But maybe you want them out of your hair if you especially have a large family, and it's a challenge and it's no downtime. So the response, I kind of hearing a little bit of not an attack on public education, but again, Dr. Ernie, you're definitely a proponent of public education. How would you respond to Rebecca and Margaret's kind of disgruntled points about public education?
Yeah, well, I think what you're both saying is that it is definitely a viable choice. It's used an example of even charter schools here in Pittsburgh now. Charter schools are having a huge resurgence due to a lot of dissatisfaction, I think, with the public schools. So once again, you have your home school, you have your charter school. Private schools in the Pittsburgh area are thriving, very expensive yet still thriving. So we have to look, I think, at all the different curricular needs of the kids. And I think that what I'm hearing from both of you is that you're both intuitive and yet intentional in the way that you teach your children. And I think that's highly important because they talk about in education, individualizing education is a huge buzzword now.
I hope it happens. That's the key. So I completely agree, and sorry to interrupt, but I think the kind of bring that question back is you are for some sort of school choice then. You're not so anti-believing that the only place is public education and if you can afford it, private.
Oh, I think I'm definitely a pro-choice for anything that families choose that can provide the very best education for their children. And if they can do that within their means, absolutely.
And that's great. And that's, again, a lot of educators out there. And that's, again, a professor at the University of Pittsburgh for so many years and Duquesne and all over the place. A very well-known person saying this, but we do have lots of people bashing this choice. And this is a good question. A guy that I have on my program a lot, Jason, the public school guy, believes that these kids become socially awkward. It doesn't provide the education that public schools provide. Rebecca, how would you respond to those two arguments?
I think it's an argument that really needs to be considered. I was absolutely, as a therapist, did not want my kids socially crippled. That was my concern. And what I was quick to find out is that they are socialized within the family, with their siblings, with their neighbors. They go to karate. They go to scouting. They go to 4-H. They go to church events. They're socialized everywhere. And it was my misconception, too, that it's like, well, I don't want my kid raised by wolves. You know, I don't want him. I want him to be able to go out in the world. And what I actually found is that, you know, that it's such a lie that your kid will be crippled. In fact, they are crippled oftentimes in the school system. And I do want to say, I too think that if your kid is thriving in public school, beautiful. Homeschooling is just simply a choice, and my only purpose is to send the message out there that many of my fears and concerns about homeschooling were unfounded, that they wouldn't get the right education, that they would be socially inept, not the truth when you look into it, that they wouldn't be able to get into college, not the truth. In fact, once you realize that the opposite is quite true, that it becomes just a choice. So like I've always said to parents that I, counsel, if your kid's thriving, leave them. No reason to change it. But if they're struggling, it's your job as a parent to give them choices and options, and homeschooling is a viable option. That's all I want people to know.
Oh, and absolutely. I'm going to give you 1 point. I disagree completely with Jason, the public school guy, about those 2 points. But I don't think homeschooling's for everyone. I think that certain moms really want that time away, or they want to work, and we shouldn't knock them. We shouldn't knock any type of education, homeschooling, charter schools, private schools, or public schools. All of them are a viable option. I'm for school choice, allowing the parents to decide the best way to educate. In my opinion, and I'm really frustrated by this, the teacher unions are putting this out there. They're putting these myths out there just for one reason and one reason only. There was only one choice for education, public education. Not saying that everyone believes the union. They work for a union, it protects them, but they're going to always, especially if they're going to be the right-hand man of the union, they're going to say these 2 things for homeschooling: socially awkward, unqualified teachers, which the parents they say are, and then last, the curriculum is terrible, and that online academies are terrible as well. So they're going to always bring those points, and it's not true. School choice is a great idea, especially if your kids are being bullied. You can find more. I appreciate Margaret and Rebecca coming by the program. You can find more info at RebeccaGrotto.com and Margaret Bream at theparentplan.com. I appreciate you guys both coming by to the studio to call in, and I thought it was a fantastic discussion. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Thank you, Neil.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right. That was Rebecca Grotto and Margaret Bream. Again, Ernie, I think that this is another controversy. This is a water cooler discussion. So many people would say, what option to go with? Well, this bullying one's going to really fire people up. You're listening to Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT in Pittsburgh, and we'll be back in just a moment.
So you've got a song about where to call for government information?
Check this out. We got the benefits and services that'll make you smile to get the answers you need. Put us on speed dial.
That is gold, Your Honor.
Kenny, dama bëgg nga jàng. Gis nga jàng dafa baax. Ndax gis nga tey ku ñi nekk ci nguur gi ñëpp. Jàngal ma sa table de multiplication ma dégg.
3 fois 1, 3. 3 fois 2, 6. 3 fois 5, 15.
bu jëkk Mariama ndaxam mën nga ñoo wax ñaata xaalis ngeen liggéey ci weer.
This year, 1 in 3 older Americans will fall at home, risking a potentially lethal hip fracture. For information on making your home safer, visit orthoinfo.org. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
We're back to the Total Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT in Pittsburgh, streaming live at WRCT.org. And I know people driving in the car are probably hot and mad about certain things going on. But this topic, I just get really, really angry about. It's something that I just think that this is one of the reasons, if I would ever pull my kids out, it would be for this reason alone, and it's bullying. And we need to find a way to make it never happen again. And it's so much easier to bully where teachers aren't able to see it and different things. So I have an expert calling in, Dr. Marcella Wilson. Dr. Marcella, thanks for calling.
Thanks for having me.
And you are definitely a cyberbullying expert, really trying to find ways to stop cyberbullying. Well, I have in the studio Dr. Ernie Detour, and Dr. Ernie Detour is going to take the side of what's going on in the school. So I'll direct the first question to Dr. Ernie. Now, the concern I have with bullying is when schools are just ignoring it completely. They know it's happened. They say, hey, we don't have certain evidence to convict that person, meaning punish that person, or parents on the other side that have a child that's bullying somebody else, they take the side of that person. Why can't we kind of eliminate bullying in this culture?
Well, I think there's a lot of answers for that, Neil. Let me just start with, when you talk about bullying in the first place, there's verbal bullying, there's bullying through, say, social exclusion or isolation, there's physical bullying, there's bullying through lies, there's a whole list of things. And in the bullying process, there is the bully, obviously, and there's the victim. And in the middle is this person called the bystander, who just sort of observes and maybe does not have the tools in which to interact. And I think sometimes that maybe school administrators have such volume to deal with.
Yes.
That oftentimes they don't deal with it specifically enough, and there are some stats like 160,000 children call off every day just because they're afraid to come to school.
Oh, it's awful. It's completely awful. That stat alone is scary. That schools are not safe just because of bullying, and I think bullying has become even more. So, Dr. Marcel, before we get into the cyberbullying, I know again, I'm sure you have understand the whole process of what's going on bullying in schools. Why do you think it's still looked at as something that kids have to deal with?
Well, they have to deal with it because when they're online, they're friends with the people that they know at school. And of course, they're talking about things that are going on online, things that they're going to do. They're sharing pictures. And so what happens in real life happens online. You have little arguments and tiffs in real life, and that spills over to their online, social lives. So that's why what happens in person affects what they do online. So it's all intertwined.
Definitely, I agree with you, and I think that the situation that happens is a situation that sometimes teachers and administrators let little things happen before they become big. It's one of the things I was taught when I student taught by my cooperating teacher when I was a greenhorn in teaching. That they said that you got to spot little things. Stop little things from happening before they become big. And a lot of times it could be something like just picking on somebody or literally saying, look at that person with that shirt on. And then it leads into spilling over to online to everyone texting. And before you know it, it becomes this huge thing because of the social media. Just think you're in a high school of 1,000 people and 600 people are tweeting on it or they're Facebooking it. And then that child, that student, it feels just horrible by this. So I think that's the big thing, and I think also that the media is playing into this, especially the TV shows and movies out there are highlighting bullying in the wrong way. They're saying it's okay. And Dr. Ernie, from dealing in the schools, especially with younger people, what do you think are the reasons? You said, first of all, the administration's dealing with that, dealing with their hands are tied, but why aren't enough laws in place to stop this?
Well, I think I'd like to just step back just a little bit, Neil, and say that I think that a lot of the skills that children need must start at a very young age, as early as 2.5, 3 years old, to help them build what we call conflict resolution skills and other kind of proactive skills in which that they can learn to deal with these kind of things. I believe the laws would be in place if someone actually got physically hurt and things of that nature, and I'm sure schools deal with this constantly. And, I just like to go back and just sort of give children these skills that they can deal with this.
Well, Well, let me just jump in for a second.
Sure.
I know from experience that a lot of schools run into problems because they can't really discipline children for what they do online. That's
Right,
not
exactly.
their decision. So what a lot of schools are doing is they're putting things in their honor codes or their code of conduct that says, you know what, if you do this, if what you do affects your school life or affects another individual in your school, then we can discipline you, because there have been cases where kids in high school were disciplined for what they did or posted on Facebook, and the parents sued and they won. So a school cannot necessarily discipline their students for what they do online, because that's freedom of speech.
Yeah, and then it spills over to the schools. So, Dr. Marcella, what would you do? Could you say that we got to look at this as something like screaming in a crowded movie theater fire, that we have to change our laws and quit with this freedom of speech online, especially when you're hurting people's characters and defamation by the cyberbullying?
Well, I think the schools are on the right track, putting things in their honor code so that they can catch it and they can discipline. But there is no one-shot approach, as I always say. It's a good start, but I think, it's a multi-pronged approach, and children just really need to understand that what you do online can affect you in your real life, and it can hurt you. I mean, people always feel a lot of freedom just posting something online. They think, no one will read it, or, it's not going to matter or mean anything, but it really can mushroom and explode. So the schools are on the right track with putting things in their honor codes and things like that. But it's going to take some time, and you can't create a law for everything, but they're on the right track.
Yeah, I agree with you that you can't create a law for everything, because then you're running into the situation. So it's got to be a measure that the schools have to put something in place. And they say that in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to have a anti-bullying campaign and statutes that have to be put into the school. And I wanted to address that with Dr. Ernie. Why do you think, and you think it's just overstaffing? It's really not happening, that we're really in a situation where they are ignoring it, even though it's put into place. They don't know how to really put it into practice. They have it in the books at their school saying we don't tolerate this, but yet then when it's time for the teachers to report it, or the administrators or the staff to report it, it doesn't happen. Yeah, there is research, Neil, that schools that have implemented programs like OWAIS and the Heartwood curriculum actually do have a reduction in bullying. It affects the social climate. There's better and more respectful relationships and things of that nature. I'm sure that money has something to do with it as far as buying the curriculum. But it would seem to me that a proactive, preventive approach is one way that we're going to, educate the kids about bullying. And I also liked your point, Doctor, about some people I think that cyber means virtual, where it really didn't happen, but it's every bit as real and hurtful as the physical bullying is. True. And I think cyber is even a lot worse in a lot of ways, because it never disappears, especially off Facebook, correct? Dr.
Correct.
That especially if that person who owns that Facebook account never gets rid of it and then continues to repost or retweet or have a video or have something that really just hurts that person completely, that it just never disappears on the World Wide Web. So a bully can really do damage online. Give us an example.
Wow. There are so many. I mean, ones that you hear in the news. Well, I'll tell you one. And this was the one that was in the news several months ago. And it's what I spoke about when I was talking about what schools can and can't do. Is in Michigan, there were some cheerleaders. They thought it was cool to, show how cute they were, they dressed in stages of undress, but they were also bullying other students who weren't as popular as they were. So as a result, they were kicked off of the cheerleading team. But the problem was that it had the school in an uproar. I mean, a couple of pictures, a couple of posts, and it really divided the school. It was very divisive. They got kicked off of the cheerleading team, and ultimately they got expelled, and that's why the parents decided to sue. But a couple of little posts led to this thing almost going to the Supreme Court. You know what I mean? The Supreme Court in Michigan. So they probably thought they were being funny. They were being cool. They were, like, showing how, their status in school. But it literally divided the whole school.
And that's such a great point. A lot of things, especially when I was a teacher, I'd hear about in the chat rooms. That's where the bullying starts, where you have a situation where, let's just say somebody was saying, look at what that person was wearing. But then it's okay. The kid might be upset about that. But then when they get home, they're in a chat room with a bunch of people from the class, and then they're just posting things back and forth, and it leads to this. Then they get back to school, and they're texting this, and then sending it to the person as well. The comments that are being made based on what they dressed like yesterday, or how they acted, or a situation where they said something funny, or how kids are so mean. So I will go back to Dr. Marcel in a second, but Dr. Ernie, I think that this is one of the reasons, that's why I definitely had Dr. Marcel on the program, that cyberbullying leads to more bullying in school.
Well, I say, if there is some reaction to what was done in cyberspace there, that oftentimes that bullying situations do eventually evolve into physical aggression or physical acts such as kicking, fighting, and such. So yes, I think it could extend to the real school. Most, I'm going to say, other than online, most bullying situations occur in school, not on the way to school, not outside of school,
right,
but actually in the school setting.
And I believe it's a process, and I've seen it firsthand in teaching now, because of, I don't think teachers they need to listen and check out Dr. Marcella and other people that are cyber experts to see how to spot these things. And that's where I'm going to go back when I get back. Is I disagree a little bit, Dr. Ernie. I think that really cyberbullying makes this explode. It used to be just passing a note. Now it's a text message. It's a picture. It's a Facebook. All these different things can be done in school with the cell phone, and I'll address that. And then not just with the cell phone in school, but also at home. It could just never stop to the point of suicide. So I would disagree with Dr. Marcella about laws being in place. I think that there needs to be the strictest laws, and I might even go back to that point a little later. But we're going to take a break. You're listening to Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT in Pittsburgh, and we'll be back in just a moment with some more on the roundtable discussion.
Our fugitive has been on the run for 90 minutes. Average foot speed over uneven terrain, barring any injuries, is 4 miles per hour. What I need from each and every one of you is a full target search of every gas station, residence, warehouse, farmhouse, hen house, outhouse, and dog house in that area. Your fugitive has just cashed in his 401k plan, and all he had to do was roll it over.
Learn about rollovers and protecting your financial future, and choose to save.
You can't mess with a big dog.
My Jamie, she was my baby girl, my precious baby girl. When Jamie was a teenager, she would spend her lunch hours going to the tanning salons. I didn't realize how dangerous they were. If you tan when you're young, your risk for melanoma are increased by 75%. That's huge. What I would say to mothers that allow their daughters to tan, no mother should have to visit their daughter in a cemetery. 1 person an hour dies from melanoma. Jamie's hour was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, March 16th, 2007. I hope no one else has to mark their hour.
This message is brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
Kenny, dama bëgg nga jàng. Gis nga jàng dafa baax. Ndax gis nga tey ku ñi nekk ci nguur gi ñëpp. Jàngal ma sa table de multiplication ma dégg.
3 et 3. 3 fois 2, 6. 3 fois 5, 15.
bu jëkk Mariama ndaxam mën nga ñoo wax ñaata xaalis ngeen liggéey ci weer bi.
We're back to the Total Education Hour on 88.3 WRCT in Pittsburgh, streaming live at WRCT.org. And people driving, I know that if you have kids in the schools, you've dealt with bullying, but also your kids are dealing with it even more. Would you agree with me what I just said, Dr. Marcella, about how it just explodes through and kind of explain even more detail how quickly things can spread because of cyberbullying?
I do agree with you, and things can spread very quickly. I mean, it within a matter of minutes, a photo or tweet could be all around the school. So if you have an incident going on within a day or two, you know, literally everyone can know, students, parents, administrators. So, yeah, I mean, it's when we were growing up, we didn't have to deal with this. You know, it was he said, she said, you know, maybe sometimes you had a photo, but in this way, everybody knows everything, and that's what makes it so hard, and it gets disseminated so quickly. It's hard to curb it and to control it, so it's very difficult to deal with, to curb it, I should say, once it gets out.
So teachers really have to start learning more, especially if they're, I guess, been around a long time, but really haven't learned the social media, how they can spot it, especially in high schools with these kids, correct?
Yes, but the problem is, you know, sometimes in some states they don't want the teachers friending students, so it's a tricky issue there.
Right.
And who can control who a teenager is texting to, their friends, or, you know, how can a teacher get involved in what they're doing on their actual cell phone? So you kind of have a fine line of what the teacher can and cannot do, but they definitely, like you said, have to be trained to spot things, and they have to have some good training in place with the school system and how to handle these situations, because you kind of border on privacy issues here, which makes it very hard.
Exactly. And I want to go back to Dr. Ernie, and then I kind of want to go back to your point as well, but I disagree. If this is happening in school, then it should not be a First Amendment or not for whatever a freedom of speech issue. It should be more than that, because if it's going on in a public environment, that there's certain rules in that public school. If someone's texting something inappropriate or something and says something bad about somebody else, there should be serious repercussions that happen. That's why we need to figure out ways of limiting electronic devices in schools because of this. Now the Note, which was the giggle, leads to 60 people in the entire school to 1,000 people in the entire school seeing a post or a certain comment in seconds. So, Dr. Ernie, how can we curb that situation where you're having all these people with their cell phones and the ability to pass notes through texting, and how they're protected with their phones? I just don't agree with that. I don't know what's your take on that.
Well, I think there should definitely be some type of curbing and limited use during class time and during school functions, what they do outside of that, we certainly can't control, and that's what I'm hearing. But just it's such a huge issue that I don't even know where to start with it. We talk about questionnaires for children, how they feel about bullying. Were they bullied themselves? Are they bullies? But some kind of a proactive approach to saying how hurtful these things are.
Yes.
Has to start somewhere, and I'm not sure you need a lot of money to implement a program like that.
No, and I think one thing, and I would agree with you, is that I think that this has to be parent-led. The parents need to stand up for this and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And if it ends up being simple lawsuits saying, if somebody goes ahead and texts somebody and they're protected or online, I consider that defamation of character, and that should not be allowed. And in specific situations, if we say something bad about somebody that's not true, a civil lawsuit can happen from that. So, Dr. Marcello, I didn't think I was going to go in that direction, but what do you think of that? You're saying, again, we're protected, freedom of speech, but if you're defamation of character, isn't that true that can be a lawsuit? A personal lawsuit between two people based on certain things that occur on Facebook or Twitter or texting?
That's true, and I will tell you that the American Bar Association has started to train its lawyers on how electronic communication, such as texting and posts and tweets, how they can use that, in cases they have in divorces and things like that. So, yes. Those can be used if a parent wants to take it there, and they want to get that electronic evidence, such as tweets or photos or posts recalled, that can be used as evidence. So, yeah, it can be, yes.
It can. So why don't we put the laws in place? This is always what I do. I direct a question. That's where maybe I should have been a lawyer at one point in time. And when I'm an educational advocate and I go after people with questions, but I think that then there needs to be laws in place. Why do we have to?
I think that the thing about it is that there are laws, not necessarily cyberbullying laws, but say if you're in school and someone is threatening you, sending you threatening tweets, well, then you take it to the police because no one is, it's illegal to do that. So then you go, hey, this student was making threats, and then you file your police report and go from there. Or if they're posting public information about you online, that's illegal. So there are laws in place, just not necessarily those quote-unquote cyberbullying laws.
Well, I think there should be. And I think I'm a big proponent of this, to push this, and parents listening to the program, anyone listening, if you're fed up with cyberbullying, call your local politicians and tell them flat out, we need to change things. And then call the United States senators and congressmen and say, we need to change what's going on, and say, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. That basically schools, if this is based on, it started in school and went outside of school, then the school should be able to handle it as well. And I'm tired of people saying, well, guess what? What they do on their free time is fine. But if kids are committing suicide because of this, if kids their whole lives are ruined, it's very, very interesting. I talk to people all the time that based on being bullied as a kid, that's why they act like they act now. And we used to look at like, hey, that's how you toughen people up. No. If it's continually a problem, it's so hurtful. I'm again this proponent. We need to put the biggest laws in place. It should be just like an IEP. If you don't follow the IEP to the T with special needs kids, it's again. I think the same thing needs to go with bullying. Bullying should be zero tolerance to the point where, guess what? If the school district doesn't follow the plan, then a lawyer should be able to go in, and the district has to pay for that representative if the school didn't handle it. What is your thought?
Yeah, and while we're looking at laws to punish or penalize offenders, I still go back to this whole idea of this proactive approach. It's just going to continue, and just the punishing is not enough. We have to create an understanding that children have to be responsible for what they say. They're accountable for their actions.
Exactly.
and we need to teach those skills to them
at a young age, which I completely agree with. And that's, but again, sometimes the parents lead to this bullying. It's a parent problem that leads to the kids to doing it, maybe because they're being physically abused or mentally abused at home. So they go out and abuse others the same way. But if we put those laws in place to protect people that are not being protected, I think that's something. So, Dr. Marcello, how can parents be able to try to stop cyberbullying so that at least they can be proactive with their kids so that they don't occur as much bullying online? How do we kind of limit it to the point to make sure that it's not happening when they get home if they are being bullied in school?
Well, they have to be active in their child's online lives. You know, they have to be, you know, reading the posts and the emails and looking at their phones. I always tell parents, you know, they come to me and say, hey, well, they might delete the posts or the tweets or the text and the photos. And I say, look, if you're paying for that cell phone, you can call the carrier and get the photos and the text. You can, Verizon or AT&T, whatever, can send that to you for the past month or whatever. So just because they delete something doesn't mean it's gone. They've got to be involved. The child has to know that the parent is on them. Like, I'm watching you. I'm watching what you're doing online. That is the biggest preventer that we found is the parents. If the parents just give them a Facebook account and let them go, all hell's going to break loose. Mm-hmm. But if they know that mama's going to be watching me, she's going to see who I'm friending or what picture I'm putting up there, they're going to act differently. And if all parents did this, we would have a dramatic drop in cyberbullying.
I would completely agree. I think you'd have a dramatic drop in bullying altogether. If you had parents talking to parents, friending parents in the entire school, having a relationship, a good PTG, good relationships with most of the parents in the school, a community to make sure that we make zero tolerance. Parents can make the change, just like we've been talking about in this program. That's why we have these roundtable discussions. So, Dr. Marcello, I really appreciate you calling the program. You can find more information on her at marcellawilson.com. And thanks again for calling. And I really want to have you back to talk more about cyberbullying because you provide such fantastic information. Thanks for calling.
Oh, anytime. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. All right. And Dr. Ernie, again, it's a pleasure. It's so great that you're able to come at this time to talk about education and really bring another perspective as an expert for 30 years. And it's fantastic that you're co-hosting with me. And what a great show. I really appreciate everyone. Thanks to my producers, Chris, my radio producer for WRCT, and Christina for Bethel Park Cable Access TV Channel 21. I hope everyone has a fantastic week, and we're going to talk some more great education talk next week. Good night, everyone.
The American Legion, we're a powerful force for the nation. We pledge ourselves to our veterans, our youth, a strong national defense, and Americanism. These 4 pillars shape our work and what we do for America. We work relentlessly within our 4 pillars of service, and we succeed. We're committed to making sure all veterans receive the benefits they deserve for the sacrifices they've made in service to America. We support and promote citizenship and integrity in America's future leaders. We know what policies, tools, and manpower our military needs to protect this great country. We fight to get these things done. We're patriots through and through. We promote and defend these values every day in communities across the nation. Go to Legion.org to find out more about the American Legion's commitment of service to America.
What are you doing, dear?
My finances. Every week I divide my allowance. Some to spend, some to charity. But the first thing I do is set aside 10% to save for my future.
That's awfully grown up. Did you learn that in school?
No, Dad taught me. He said if you want something tomorrow, you have to save today. Dad's saving for retirement. I'm saving for a new bike.
Choose to save. To learn how to get started, get your free Power to Choose brochure.
He's a smart man, your father.